So the economy is possibly going into a recession per the 57% of CEOs that say that we're going to hit a recession. And a recession is typically defined as 2 quarters of GDP shrinkage, not to be confused with other type of shrinkage. And the question is, what is GDP and how does that work? And how can you tell if we're in a recession? Now, I will caveat this. I'll explain how GDP works and what it is in a minute. But I will caveat this by saying that they did recently change the recession calculation. I'm up here on Investopedia. And basically it says the National Bureau of Economic Research, which officially declares recession, says the 2 consecutive quarters of decline in real GDP are not how it's defined anymore. The NBER defines a recession as a significant decline in economic activity spread across the economy lasting more than a few months, normally visible in real GDP, real income, employment, industrial production, and wholesale retail sales. So a lot of that has to do with maybe just trying to give them a lever or a way out of saying we're not totally in a recession, so they don't cause probably a lot of panic, because I imagine that, well, it's 2 quarters of recession time, beep, 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 beep. The alarms go off, everything goes crazy. People panic sell, people freak out, people quit their jobs because they're going to get laid off or fired anyways. There's all chaos in the streets. Us rubes can't really handle that, right? So, us citizens can't handle that. We're not intellectual enough to handle a situation like that, right? So, it's probably what they think, the political elite and the ones up in charge of all of us, right? So that being said, let's talk about GDP, because it's a big factor in how you determine if you're in a recession. So what is GDP? Well, it stands for gross domestic product. And if we want to be exactly for sure, I will actually just read the definition off Investopedia again. That way it's 100% their words. So gross domestic product is the total monetary or market value of all the finished goods and services produced within a country's borders in a specific time period. As a broad measure of overall domestic production, it functions as a comprehensive scorecard of a country's given economic health. Blah, 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 blah. Long story short, basically, it's how much you produce as a country, the value of what you produce as a country, quarter over quarter. Now, most things are annualized. Most things are typically done on a yearly basis. But because you don't want to wait a year to know if you're in a recession or not, they are released quarterly as comparisons to, kind of get a good gauge as how's the economy working, how's it doing. So when you hear GDP, that's what it stands for, gross domestic product. And I'll give you an example to kind of maybe this helps. I always like to have examples of things that, are maybe less complicated. So chapstick. This is my chapstick. This is the chapstick that I use. Well, let's just say that your country, to simplify this, all they do is produce chapstick. That's their production, gross domestic product. So this is their product. This is all they do. This is all you do in your country is produce chapsticks. And let's say chapsticks sell for $1 and you produce 100 chapsticks in the first quarter of let's say this year, 2022. So you at 100, they sell for $1. Your gross domestic product is $100. It's that simple. Now, say the second quarter, chapsticks are still $1. And now you've produced 102 of them. So you made 102. Now, when I say produce, it's like you made it, you built it, and everything like that. So you made 102 of these. Well, 102 divided by 100 is 2%. So you had an increase in your gross domestic product. You had an increase. Now, this is still $1. That's why it has to still be $1. 2% increase, right? That's how this works. So that's really what they're looking at now. Obviously, this is, if you're watching this in the US like I am, obviously this is a calculation of millions and billions of things, right? All put together, right? But like I said, this is very simplified. Your country, hopefully it survives by producing just 100 things of chapsticks at $1 a piece. And it probably doesn't. So either way, chapsticks. Now, getting into real and nominal terms, these things are thrown around a lot. And what you really are looking for is the real GDP number. The difference being is the real number is adjusted for inflation, nominal is not. So, for example, let's go back to our chapstick example. Like I said, we produced 100 of these, and they were $1 a piece. So we sold them for $100 a piece. Now let's just say chapsticks now sell for $1.50. Okay, and the second month we produced another 100 chapsticks. Okay, same amount. We produced the same amount, but now they sell for $1.50. Okay, well, what we would see in the nominal GDP numbers is that our gross domestic product, and measured in nominal terms, was $150, because 100 times $1.50 is $150. But the chapstick is really only selling at $1.50 because we had 50% of inflation. We had 50% inflation. So I know that if you've seen the inflation numbers, the prices of things going up in value, but not really for any reason, maybe because of lack of supply or various factors that cause inflation, right? So when you measure this, you would be sitting there going, well, I did a pretty dang good job. I increased the economy by 50% by passing all these policies and stuff in my country, and I did a great job. Pat myself on the back. Obviously, it's going to be very easy for the people of my $100 chapstick island to vote for me back in again, because obviously 50% it's never been done before. All the self-promotion stuff, right? So the reason why we use real GDP to measure it is because you want to really know what actually is happening. So you don't get people like that sitting there saying, oh, I did all these great things, but the reality is all you did was increase cost on things and you didn't really help us produce anything. So that is why when you do real GDP is measured in and uses inflation. It's adjusted for inflation. So now it says, okay, well, inflation was 50%. So you made 100 of these. Inflation was 50%. So we need to adjust the number of GDP because to make the 100 equal to the 150 in comparison to, if all things were equal, 100 and 150, you only produced 100 of these. You made $100 one year, but because inflation, the only reason you actually made it seem as though you produced more is because your inflation went up by 50%. So you didn't really raise anything. You technically produced 100 of these again. They stayed at $1 in one year, in one quarter. The next quarter, inflation went up 50%. That's the only reason that you have GDP. So in this example, if GDP was 50% and you produced 100 of these, and your first example is 100 at $1, and the second example is at 100 at $1.50, that would be zero increase in GDP, in real GDP. See, the nominal GDP would show a 50% increase. The real GDP would show zero increase, because really the only reason it looks like you produced more is because inflation went up by 50%. So this is why we use the real GDP number in factoring things, because the reality is you could have produced 98. Let's do the example again to really make it to really drive it home, really give another example as to why real GDP is used and measured. Because let's just say example that you produced, these are now, like I said, you had 50% inflation, so these sell for $1.50 now, right? Quarter one, you had 100 that you sold for $1. Inflation went up 50%, so now it's $1.50 for this thing. You didn't do anything. You didn't do anything extra. It's not like you produced more. You didn't do anything extra. Actually, in this example, you produced less. Let's say now that you produced 90. Let's say you produced 90 of these. Okay, so you produce less chapsticks now. Oh, great. Well, in nominal terms, 90 times $1.50 is some math that I can't think of at the moment. But let's just say it's about $1.30. I actually think what's 50% of 90 is 45 plus 90 is what, $1.25. So you have $125 now. I think, quick math in my head, and I'm probably wrong. If I'm wrong, go ahead and correct me. That's fine. I'm okay with being wrong on some things. You know what I'm trying to say, though. This would say that in nominal terms, we had $125 in GDP. And now, here I pat myself on the back again. I increased GDP by 25%. I am the man. That's what I do. I'm the man. Vote me in again. But the reality is you produce less. And adjusted for inflation, you actually shows that you produce less Because if inflation was 50%, these are $1.50 now, it really shows that, okay, well, if I remove that 50 bucks, really you only produce 90. So you produce your real GDP would be $90 because we got to get it equal back to that $1 where we started, right? When you reduce it for inflation. So if you would comparing apples to apples, right? And so then basically it would show that you only actually had 90 and actually your economy shrank by 10%. And that's why you use that. And that's very important to note is that when using real GDP, it measures how much your economy has grown or shrank. Now, going back to this example, let's say that it took you the whole month or quarter for, you have 10 guys that make 10 chapsticks for your $100 and your 100 chapsticks. And now you only made 90, right? But they only get paid per the chapsticks they make, but they only made 90 this time. So now what happens is those people make less money. And this happens on, let's say, this global scale of obviously the U.S. and every other country. They all measure their GDPs and such. And that's what you really have to start looking at, because then that shrinks the economy. And if that person's making less money, they have less to spend on, their McDonald's or whatever it is they go eat. And then that McDonald's then has less food coming in and demand coming in. So they order less cows or slaughter less cows or whatever like that. So the farmers have less cows that they have to take care of. I mean, it's a crazy, it's a crazy trickle effect. And that's why it's so important to understand. And that's how, you start to see a recession take place, is because as less people have less to spend, this is where we end up. But I appreciate it, guys. I'm going to sign off here. I hope you guys learned anything, and I hope I explained it well enough. If I didn't, please leave it in the comments below. Let me know how I did. I'm trying to start this off, help people out in understanding how this whole world of economics and such actually works, while I learn along the way as well. I'm not an expert in everything. I know a little bit about, I maybe know a little bit about a lot, or a lot about a little. It depends on what the subject actually is. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I appreciate you tuning in.